America's strategic bombers unleashed a devastating strike that wiped out Iran's largest underground missile tunnel networks within seconds. Waves of B-52 bombers dropped enormous 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, collapsing entrances and exits buried deep inside the mountains almost instantly. The vast tunnel systems, hidden hundreds of meters beneath solid rock, were suddenly turned into sealed infernos, with fires raging through the underground corridors. Thousands of elite Iranian troops and vast stockpiles of missile ammunition, amounting to tens of thousands of tons, were trapped inside. With every access point destroyed, escape became impossible. No missiles could be launched, no reinforcements could reach them, and all communication with the outside world was effectively cut off. What had once been the regime's most formidable strategic asset, the notorious underground missile cities, was transformed into one of the deadliest traps in modern military history. The operation, codenamed Epic Fury, began on February 28, 2026. Marking one of the most dramatic demonstrations of American air power in recent years. Its most destructive phase occurred on March 2, 2026. The main targets were gigantic ballistic missile complexes carved directly into mountains near Khorramabad in Lorestan Province and near Tabriz in East Azerbaijan Province. Facilities that had required billions of dollars and years of engineering to construct. The first site struck was the underground complex near Khorramabad. Known as the Imam Ali Base, this installation represented the largest ballistic missile facility in Iran. Beneath the mountain lay a vast subterranean city, a network of tunnels stretching between 36 and 50 kilometers in length. Inside this labyrinth, hundreds of Shahab-3 variant missiles were stored. Hidden launch platforms were prepared for rapid deployment, and massive ammunition depots were arranged throughout the tunnels. For years, this underground network formed the core of Iran's regional deterrence strategy. Carrying out this mission with aircraft as large and visible as the B-52 was considered extremely difficult. Yet Iran's air defense network, largely dependent on early warning radar systems built from copied technologies, was effectively blinded during the opening hours of the operation. Coordinated cyber attacks and powerful electronic warfare systems shut down radar coverage across wide regions. As a result, personnel stationed hundreds of meters beneath the mountains had no clear understanding of the danger unfolding above them. With radar displays dark and communication disrupted, Iranian defense systems were unable to detect the incoming threat. For a brief 48-hour window, Iran's airspace became dangerously exposed. Seizing that moment, the U.S. Air Force deployed its heavy strategic bombers, the B-52 Stratofortress, to carry out the strike. On the night of March 2nd, waves of bombardment from these aircraft descended on what had been Iran's largest underground missile complex near Khorramabad. The attack followed a layered strategy designed to destroy the facilities step by step. In the first phase, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers quietly entered Iranian airspace and released 30,000-pound GBU-57 bunker buster bombs. These massive weapons burrowed deep into the mountainside, shattering reinforced doors and critical support structures within seconds. The GBU-57's aerodynamic design, combined with its immense weight and gravitational acceleration, generates enormous kinetic force upon impact. Capable of penetrating roughly 60 meters of reinforced concrete and hard rock, the bomb produces a powerful seismic shockwave that fractures internal tunnel structures beyond repair. Moments after the initial penetrations, B-1 Lancer and B-52 Stratofortress aircraft arrived to continue the assault. The B-1 Lancer, flying at supersonic speeds, swept through the region targeting mobile air defense batteries, eliminating them one by one before rapidly exiting the area. Following that, The B-52 bombers unleashed thousands of pounds of JDAM precision-guided munitions against surface infrastructure. Ventilation shafts, support buildings, communications antennas, and power transmission lines were systematically destroyed. More than 8 major tunnel entrances were crushed almost instantly by additional bunker-buster strikes. Several GBU-57 bombs drove deep into the mountains, collapsing internal passageways and causing large sections of the tunnel network to cave in. Massive explosions inside the mountain produced enormous fireballs that burst outward from the rock face. Satellite monitoring systems later recorded extreme heat signatures in the region following the attack. Chain reaction explosions inside underground ammunition depots generated intense heat waves that spread through the mountains and eventually reached the surface. The Khorramabad complex was devastated. Iran's largest missile storage hub was reduced to rubble. And while Khorramabad burned, the underground silo complex near Tabriz in East Azerbaijan province faced the same fate. This installation, linked by nearly 100 kilometers of tunnels, had been one of the primary launch sites for missiles used in regional strikes. With its extensive tunnel network, the Tabriz complex represented Iran's second-largest missile arsenal. It had already sustained heavy damage during earlier operations in June 2025, but the facilities had been rebuilt. During the first wave of attacks between February 28 and March 4, intense bombardment buried many of the entrances and support points of the underground network. The massive reinforced chambers inside the mountains may have shielded some missiles from immediate destruction. But with ventilation systems, electrical networks, and elevator shafts destroyed, personnel and equipment inside the tunnels were effectively isolated. Missiles could not be moved to the surface. Communication systems were severed. Reinforcements could not reach them. Imagine being trapped in a tunnel 80 meters underground, surrounded by darkness and debris, shaken by repeated detonations. Above ground, surveillance aircraft circle continuously, monitoring every movement. Any attempt to reopen an entrance would be detected instantly. Within minutes, a precision-guided GBU-31 bomb could strike the exact location. Perhaps the most alarming detail comes from intelligence estimates. Reports suggest that between 1,000 and 1,500 Revolutionary Guard personnel stationed at the two major facilities, Khorramabad and Tabriz, were left trapped underground when tunnel entrances collapsed. Hundreds of meters below the surface, they were cut off from air, light, and escape routes, and this estimate accounts only for those two complexes. Across the country, the situation may be far larger. Intelligence assessments suggest Iran has close to 100 underground military facilities. If those numbers are accurate, as many as 250,000 personnel could potentially be deployed across these subterranean bases. Iran's total military manpower is estimated at roughly 960,000 personnel. That means a significant portion of its forces operate within underground infrastructure. The possibility that a large fraction of such a force could become trapped within its own hardened facilities rather than deployed on the battlefield represents a highly unusual scenario in modern warfare. Reports indicate that numerous command structures were disrupted. Some barracks were evacuated, and several senior officers were reportedly killed in the wider strikes. Iran's military planners had invested heavily in underground fortifications precisely to avoid such catastrophic losses. Yet the scale and coordination of the attack created a situation few had anticipated. And the story may not end there. Military analysts suggest that preparations on the ground point to the possibility of further operations. The combination of cyber warfare, intelligence coordination, and long-range aviation demonstrated during this strike highlights the scale of strategic planning involved. In the first phase of the operation, the United States relied heavily on extremely advanced and extremely expensive stealth aircraft, such as the B-2 Spirit, to neutralize radar and air defense systems. Once those defenses were suppressed and access points destroyed, the operation shifted to the older but still formidable B-52 Stratofortress, capable of delivering massive payloads over long distances. Another strategic dimension of the campaign involved the use of British military bases, which reportedly supported elements of the long-range aviation operations. The U.S. administration deployed 3 B-52H strategic bombers to RAF Fairford, the Royal Air Force Base in the United Kingdom. This deployment signaled that Operation Epic Fury was not intended to be a brief strike, but rather part of a sustained operational campaign. By operating from forward bases such as the UK and Diego Garcia instead of launching missions from across the Atlantic, the United States could dramatically increase the number of bombing sorties. American bombers began maintaining a continuous rotating presence in the region's airspace. This strategy placed constant military and psychological pressure on the leadership in Tehran. With aircraft capable of striking at any moment, hopes among Iranian forces of reorganizing or regrouping were severely diminished. The United Kingdom's authorization for the use of its airspace and bases also carried diplomatic significance. It indicated that a broader international alignment was forming against Iran, deepening Tehran's strategic isolation on the global stage. Many observers questioned why B-52 bombers, originally introduced in the 1960s, were being used instead of the more modern B-2 stealth aircraft. The answer lies largely in operational cost and efficiency. A single hour of flight for a B-2 can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, while the B-52's hourly cost is estimated at roughly $70,000. Once air defenses had been suppressed and air superiority established, the expensive stealth capability of the B-2 was no longer necessary. In this environment, the B-52 functioned as a flying arsenal, capable of carrying enormous payloads of precision-guided weapons. Operating freely in the sky, these aircraft delivered a steady stream of relatively inexpensive but highly effective munitions against any targets that attempted to emerge from underground installations. The situation illustrated how a military campaign could combine overwhelming firepower with cost-efficient strategy, placing not only military pressure but also economic strain on the adversary. This growing asymmetry suggested that the United States could potentially sustain the operation for weeks if necessary. And that raises a larger question. Why was the destruction of these underground facilities considered so significant? The answer lies in the central concept of Iran's military doctrine, the missile cities. For decades, Iran invested enormous resources in constructing vast underground missile complexes carved deep into mountainous terrain. Over nearly 40 years, engineers built hundreds of kilometers of tunnels and buried thousands of ballistic missiles, launch platforms, ammunition depots, and command centers 80 to 90 meters beneath the surface. These facilities were collectively referred to as missile cities. There were silos near Khorasan, a 50-kilometer tunnel network in Khorramabad, a massive 100-kilometer complex near Tabriz, and large missile storage caverns in Shiraz. Each installation functioned like an underground military city. The Iranian leadership had so much confidence in this network that it openly prepared its population for the possibility of a long war lasting up to 5 years, believing these hardened installations would guarantee the country's strategic deterrence. However, the strikes on the Khorramabad and Tabriz complexes triggered a severe logistical and humanitarian crisis inside the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Collapsing rock formations and destroyed tunnel entrances reportedly left over 1,000 personnel trapped hundreds of meters underground inside these facilities. The immediate military consequence of the attack appeared in the form of a major logistical bottleneck. With tunnel entrances sealed and support systems destroyed, missiles stored underground could no longer be transported to the surface. According to official statements from U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, just 4 days after the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, between February 28 and March 4th, Iran's ballistic missile launches dropped by 86%, while one-way attack drone launches fell by 73%. Admiral Brad Cooper stated that more than 1,700 targets had been struck during the operation. A large portion of Iran's missile stockpiles and unmanned aerial vehicle munitions were destroyed. In practical terms, Iran's ability to launch large-scale retaliatory strikes was severely reduced. Any missile launch ramps attempting to activate from mountainous areas were rapidly identified and destroyed by U.S. drones and fighter aircraft patrolling overhead. Targets that emerged to fire were often neutralized within minutes. From a tactical perspective, the synchronized use of 3 different strategic bomber platforms required extremely sophisticated planning. The stealth capabilities of the B-2, the speed of the B-1 Lancer, and the massive payload capacity of the B-52 Stratofortress were combined into a coordinated operational system. Together, these elements created a strike capability that dismantled major portions of Iran's military infrastructure. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth summarized the imbalance in blunt terms, stating that the confrontation was never intended to be evenly matched. Looking beyond the immediate battlefield, the consequences of this destruction could ripple across the broader region. Iran's network of allied militias and armed groups, often referred to as the Axis of Resistance, relies heavily on Iranian support, funding, and supplies. As their primary logistical hubs suffered damage, these groups faced increasing uncertainty about the continuity of that support. Without a steady flow of weapons, ammunition, and financial backing, their ability to maintain operational strength could weaken significantly. The weakening of Iran's strategic umbrella may force these groups to operate more independently, increasing pressure on the Iranian leadership both domestically and regionally. Diplomatically, Iran's leverage in Middle Eastern negotiations could also decline. The powerful missile arsenal that once served as a key bargaining chip is now partially buried beneath collapsed mountains. While the government attempts to maintain an image of strength before its own population, its deterrence capability against external adversaries may be substantially reduced. Neighboring countries, many of which have long viewed Iran's missile program as a major security threat, are closely watching these developments. At a broader level, the operation illustrates the growing impact of technological asymmetry in modern warfare. Static fortifications, no matter how massive, can struggle to survive against advanced satellite intelligence, precision-guided weapons, and integrated cyber operations. One side relied on flexible technology, real-time intelligence, and dynamic targeting systems. The other relied on fixed infrastructure built deep within mountains. Precision weapons such as the JASSM cruise missiles carried by B-52 bombers exposed the vulnerability of that approach. Structures once considered nearly invulnerable were suddenly shown to be far more fragile than expected. For Iran, returning to the same underground strategy may now carry significant risks and costs. The mountains that were once considered protective shields may increasingly be viewed as potential traps. The events surrounding Operation Epic Fury demonstrate how rigid doctrines can collapse when confronted by rapidly evolving technology and strategic innovation. Iran's underground missile cities, long portrayed as the backbone of its military power, were transformed into zones of strategic catastrophe under the bombardment of modern air power. Built with billions of dollars in investment and designed to symbolize the regime's strength, these mountain complexes collapsed deep underground along with the personnel stationed inside them. Operation Epic Fury did more than destroy weapons infrastructure. It challenged the very foundation of Tehran's long-standing military doctrine. What are your thoughts on this situation? Share your perspective in the comments. Thank you for watching.